You've probably seen it scrolling online, right? The claim that just two companies, BlackRock and Vanguard, secretly own almost everything. It sounds like something straight out of a conspiracy movie, but it actually points to a massive and very real shift in our economy. So, okay, let's dive in and try to separate the facts from the fiction.
And you can really feel the vibe behind this whole thing when you read comments like this one from Reddit. It just captures this genuine fear that a huge amount of power is getting concentrated into the hands of a very, very small group of people, all happening just out of sight. So, is there any truth to it? All right, let's get right to it and tackle that huge question head on. What are the actual facts behind this claim that two firms basically own the world?
Well, the numbers are, and I am not exaggerating, absolutely staggering. As of early 2024, BlackRock is managing something like $10.5 trillion, and Vanguard is right there with them at $9.3 trillion. To give you some perspective, that combined total is more than the GDP of every single country on Earth, except for the US and China. It's just a mind-boggling amount of money.
But, and this is the key thing you got to understand, they don't own these assets the way you or I own a house. They manage them for millions of everyday investors, people with 401ks and retirement accounts. Still, their influence, it's undeniable. Together, they are among the biggest shareholders in nearly 90% of the most important companies in America, and that is where the real story begins.
So, how in the world did we get here? How did this happen? Well, this massive concentration of influence brings us to this really important economic idea that's being debated right now: common ownership.
Common ownership is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's when one single giant investor, like a Vanguard fund, owns a big piece of Coca-Cola and also a big piece of PepsiCo, or they own shares in Ford and in General Motors. They become the common owner of companies that are supposed to be direct competitors.
The engine behind all of this has been the absolute explosion of passive investing. See, instead of paying some Wall Street manager a ton of money to actively pick stocks they hope will win, most of us now just put our money into low-cost index funds. These funds don't try to be heroes. They just buy a little piece of every company in an index like the S&P 500. And who are the undisputed giants of index funds? You guessed it, BlackRock and Vanguard. And wow, this graph just lays it all out. If you go back to 1980, it was actually pretty rare for two competing companies to have the same major owner. But look at that climb. Today, it's totally the norm. We're talking about a jump from less than 20% to over 60% of public companies having these common owners. This isn't just some small change, it's a fundamental rewiring of our market.
So you might be thinking, okay, they own a lot of stuff through my index fund. What's the big deal? If they're just passively holding stocks, who cares? Well, this is where it gets really juicy, because a lot of economists are now arguing this could be a massive threat to good old-fashioned competition.
Let me break down the theory of how this could hurt you. Imagine you're an investor, and you own big chunks of every major airline. Now, what if one airline decides to start a big price war to grab more customers? Sure, that one airline might do great, but it's going to tank the profits for the entire airline industry. And since your portfolio holds the whole industry, your total investment gets hammered. So the unspoken incentive is for everyone to, just play nice, keep prices comfortably high, not compete too hard. And hey, this is not just some academic theory. Just look at the top shareholders for the major US airlines. See any familiar names? Yeah, BlackRock, Vanguard, Berkshire Hathaway, they are all over the place. When the same few investors are the biggest owners of supposed rivals, you got to ask yourself, how fiercely are those rivals really motivated to go after each other?
Economists even have a special tool for this. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's called the MHII. Basically, it's a souped-up version of the normal index they use to see if a market has a monopoly. This modified version takes all these common ownership links into account, giving a much more realistic and sometimes much scarier picture of how little competition there might actually be. But come on, are these giant firms really sitting in some secret room telling CEOs not to compete? Or is there something more subtle going on? This gets us right into the middle of a huge debate over how much influence they really have.
And this comment, again from Reddit, just nails it. The whole idea that these firms are passive is, well, kind of a myth. They have these huge teams called investment stewardship teams. Their entire job is to talk to the management of companies they invest in, vote in board elections, and basically make their voice heard. So passive definitely doesn't mean silent. Now, on the flip side, there are some really strong arguments that this whole idea is overblown. First off, a CEO has a legal duty to their company's shareholders, not to BlackRock's entire portfolio. Then there's the fact that these stewardship teams are actually pretty tiny when you consider they have to oversee thousands of companies. How much can they really do? And the data shows they almost never vote against what management wants anyway.
So maybe the influence isn't about direct orders. It's less, hey, don't lower your prices, and more about subtle, indirect stuff. Like maybe executive pay gets tied to how the whole industry is doing, not just how one company is doing. Or maybe managers just know who their biggest shareholders are, and they act in ways they think will keep those big investors happy without anyone ever saying a word.
Okay, so with this whole complicated mess, what do we actually do about it? Well, regulators are starting to wake up to this, and there are a few different ideas on the table for what could happen next.
The options really run the gamut. Some people say, hey, we've got antitrust laws, let's just use those. Others are proposing really tough new rules, like capping how much of one industry a single investor can own. Then there's a softer approach, creating safe harbors for smaller investors. And of course, there are plenty of people who say, hold on, the evidence isn't strong enough yet. Let's not do anything drastic.
And this, right here, is the real pickle policymakers are in. For decades, we've been told that big investors need to be more involved to keep CEOs in line. That's good corporate governance. But now, competition experts are worried that this very same involvement is what's killing competition. It seems like you can't have it both ways.
So no, BlackRock and Vanguard don't literally own everything. But their rise has totally reshaped our markets. And it leaves us with this huge, profound question. Is this incredible concentration of influence a bug in the system that we need to fix? Or is it just the logical, inevitable endpoint for a financial world that's built on the ideas of diversification and massive scale?